Hola mis amigos, ¿qué bola? In today's travel via art video, we are going to Cuba. I'll be chatting to you about some of the things that make this country unique while I'm painting a conguero, which is a Cuban musician playing the Cuban conga. And before we start, do you know who the queen of salsa is? Let's find out. So the first thing that we're going to do is grab our rough pencil sketch or design and trace the silhouette of it onto the leather. We're going to do that with a light marker so that the colors will pop afterwards and that we have a reference for the borders. The markers that I'm using are Posca markers. You can see all the materials in the description as well. Because we cannot erase, you want to make sure that you work from small to big. So if you're unsure about where to place your line, just place it a bit closer to the center or like in a smaller area essentially so that you can still make it bigger afterwards. Now let's get into some of the Cuban demographics. Before we do that, I just want to clarify I'm not from Cuba and I've not yet visited, so if I get something wrong, just let me know in the comments. Now let's get to it. So Cuba is located in the Caribbean and it's made out of 2 islands and various archipelagos. It's the island of Cuba and island of the Juventud, which means the island of youth in Spanish. The capital is Havana, Nana. I know you heard it too. Its population is 11.32 million in 2021, and it's made out of Taino, Spanish, and people with African roots. The currency is the Cuban pesos, and the official language is Spanish. The next step for the painting is to choose my colors and start painting with markers and acrylic paint. To mix more colors and create more depth, I use the dry and wet blending techniques. In essence, the more wet the paint is when you're mixing the colors, the more the colors will blend with each other. However, with the dry method, they will not blend as much and each color will be more visible individually. Which one to choose will depend on what you want it to look like. Cuba is a small country, but it is actually very famous for so many different things. I'd love to hear what comes to your mind when you think of Cuba. To me, immediately I think handmade cigars, Cuba Libre, which is white rum, Coke and lime, a Cuban sandwich, which is called the Cubano. There's a bit of a debate of where it actually comes from and what goes into it. I left in the description a little audio where there's a bit of a debate, but most people would agree that it has Swiss cheese, a mix of meats such as pork, ham. It would have pickles, some mustard on a sweet soft bread, which is grilled in a very specific pan grill. Other types of Cuban cuisine include rice, bean, plantain, so stuff that you kind of might know a lot from the Latin cuisine, such as also countries from Panama, where I'm originally from. I leave another video in the description so that you can also check out more about Panama if you're interested. Then there's also tostones rellenos, which I would call patacones. So if you're Latino or Latina or Latinx, let me know what you call them in your country. Then there's, of course, the old school cars, which are just beautiful to look at. Then there is the Café Cubano, which is Cuban coffee. It is very sweet. They put a lot of sugar into it. And I've also left a recipe in the description below if you wanted to make it at home as well. Things that are maybe less known about Cuba are their popular sports like baseball and dominoes. Or they have a unique tradition on New Year's Eve to throw out a bucket of dirty water out of the window. This symbolizes tossing out all of the bad memories of previous years. Maybe something to consider for next New Year's. Another superstition is, and I picked this one out because in Panama it's the same, you don't ever leave your purse or your handbag on the floor because it is believed that you will lose your money or that your money will run away. So keep that in mind next time. However, my absolute favorite thing about Cuba is the music, and to be precise, it is salsa. And I'm not talking about the dance, but the music. Not the sauce, the music. Based on the research I did, salsa originates from Cuba in the 1920s and later was popularized internationally in the 1960s in New York, primarily by Cuban and other Latin American immigrants. Salsa became a way for immigrants to reflect and share their struggles being an immigrant, the challenges of discrimination, inequality, and crime, plus, of course, Latin pride. When I read this, it gave me goosebumps. I think the song that best personifies this for me has to be Mi Tierra from Gloria Estefan, who just happens to also be Cuban. The song is about the pain you feel because you're away from home. She describes this beautifully through metaphors and analogies where instruments cry or lament or are sad. One of the most recognizable sounds of salsa is the clave, which means key in Spanish. And it goes something like this. I will also link another video of an actual musician that knows what he's talking about to explain how the clave is played and how complex it actually is, even though it is on these conga drums. It's an instrument that appears to be relatively simplistic. So I'd love to tell you a little bit more about the conga now and how it's made. While mine is made with acrylic paint, the real ones are made with wood and leather or animal skin. Some are synthetic, and the modern ones also have some mechanical elements in them to help you tune the whole system. And a high-end conga would be made out of one single piece of wood. When looking at the origins of the Congo drums, we will be brought to Africa, specifically to the Bantu-speaking Congo region in Africa around the 17th and 18th century. The closest drum to the conga we know today is called makuta drum. When fusing the Bantu Congolese drums with the influence of Spanish music and instruments, we get the conga as we know it today. There is a variety of sizes and types of congas, and also the terminology can vary, but the most important ones are la tumbadora, which is the largest one. Then there is the conga, or also called tres golpes, which is a medium-sized one, and then the smallest one, which is called el quinto. The biggest one can make the lowest sound, and the smallest one makes the highest sound. Now that we're adding the finishing touches onto the painting, it's time to reveal who the queen of salsa is. It's the one and only Celia Cruz. Azúcar! And the final step for the painting process is to varnish your design with your preferred varnish medium. I like to use a square brush so that I can reach the very edge of the design without getting onto the leather. The reason for this is that on the leather, the varnish is very obvious, so you want to avoid getting any on it. Once this is dry, you can then sew the notebook together and ta-da! You have your finished product. Before the reveal, I just want to thank you for being here, and I hope if you like the video that you give it a thumbs up and that you subscribe to my channel so that you travel with me via art to many other beautiful countries in the world. See you in the next video!